You're listening to On the Road Again, a road trip through the Bible, with Todd Seelau and Zach Bechtold. Now let's hit the road.
All right, well, welcome to the X-ile podcast, and this is Zach, and I'm Todd, and we have with us today Ross Whitaker. I guess we should introduce ourselves. I'm the pastor. My name is Reverend Todd Seelau. I'm the pastor of a church called X-ile. You want to introduce yourself, Zach?
Oh, sure. I'm Zach Bechtold. I am the pastor at Grace United Methodist Church in Cheyenne, Wyoming.
And I am Ross Whitaker. I'm the pastor of Morning Star United Methodist Church in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
All right. Well, we're going to talk today with Ross and with each other about creation and the idea of creation and the idea of how God created and how we're created in that image, so that we also create, and creating is a holy and divine venture. So this is our very first podcast here, so bear with us. I will read from Genesis chapter 1, and we're just going to read kind of through the whole chapter and talk about it a little bit. I'll read it in chunks, then we can kind of give our thoughts on it, and then we'll talk about what that means in the midst of creation and in our lives where we all create. But before we get started, how do you guys, what are some things you guys do to create? What are some creative outlets that you guys usually use or like to use?
I guess for me, podcasting is one of them. That's something I've done for the last handful of years. I've got another podcast that I'm on, Bearded Theologians, that it's been a consistent space in my life for creation. On top of doing a little bit of music, not well, but dinking around on the guitar and some things in that way. Yeah, those outside of, what work is in the church and creating ministries and space for people. But I would say those are probably the most tangible ways in which I create.
That's awesome.
Yeah, for me, like, I don't know, man, like outside of work and church, which I do think like a lot of the work that we do in church is creative in nature, or at least I think it should be. Like the things I do that are creative is I do, like, I like to write. I don't share things that I write, and I don't write nearly as much maybe as I should have or should. But I do like to write. And then I like mess around with woodworking. I just kind of bounce from thing to thing. Like I'll get an idea like, hey, I want to start learning to play the banjo. So I've got a banjo that I mess around with. I do some woodwork. I write some poetry, like just for the fun of it. And then I've got a lot of stuff in my head, like a lot of writing and poetry in my head that I'm like constantly like working through. Yeah, but I also like, I find inspiration in creative things also. So I do, like, I listen to a lot of music and I read a lot of poetry, and like being outdoors and looking at creation inspires me. So I don't know that I do as much creative stuff as I would like, but I get inspired by creative things a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. And being out in nature and in creation, I think is a big thing about honoring that and how that influences you, too. And you do that. You're outdoorsman. I love that. I play in a band called Next to the Tracks, and I play, like, I'm a drummer. So I love music, and music has been always my kind of creative outlet, whether it was listening to it or playing it. I write some too, and I've been trying to write more and journal more and do kind of more spiritual kind of disciplines and stuff that are creative and that aids in my creativity. And so I don't know. I think that just doing, I'm a terrible drawer or artist, so I don't do any of that. Do either of you guys draw? Or any of you
Not
guys
well.
draw?
I doodle like crazy, man.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. That's better than me. I can't even doodle, but I do like to write. And I want to get back into kind of blogging more and writing more. I wrote a dissertation in 2010, and it totally burned me out. Like, I haven't really written much since then. Totally burned me out from writing, because I'm not that good of a writer, and it doesn't come natural to me. And packing all that writing into such a short amount of time just really messed me up. And so I need to get back to that, though, because I kind of miss it, and I'm starting to get in a point in my life where I'm being more creative, and I need more outlets for that creativity than just music. And especially because the music scene has changed so much because of COVID here, so we can't play as many shows, or hardly nearly as many shows as we were playing. So I don't get as much of a chance for that. So have to find some other things to do. I'm going to read a little bit here from Genesis 1, and then we can kind of visit about it and give our thoughts about it, and kind of get through it together here. Genesis 1 says, "In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light, and God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day." You can take this day by day. Was anything jump out about that to you guys?
I always like when I read this, and I'm not trying to like come up with something to preach on or something to teach people from it,
Yeah.
I think it allows my imagination to play a little bit more. And so I like this first creation story. I like this version better than the next version. I like the poetry in this, but I think it's interesting to think about, and this is super weird, man, but like thinking about naming things, like
Oh, yeah.
the creativity of like coming up with a name for something, man, that's hard. Like, because once you name something, that's that thing's name, like whether it be a
Yeah.
ministry or an event or a person or whatever, like that's the name for a long time. It maybe forever. And it just feels a little bit overwhelming. And so the fact that like God in this kind of playful poem is represented as like just being able to name things. And I don't know, there's something about that that gets my imagination going.
Yeah, and in the second creation story, right, Adam is given that job to name things. So like naming things in both stories is, I think that's important to point out, that there's two creation stories that are written very differently by different people for different reasons, and that's in the first chapter of Genesis and the second chapter of Genesis. So when we're referring to two creation stories, it's just chapter 1 tells this story, and then chapter 2 tells a more personal story, right, of Adam and Eve, and the story that a lot of us are also familiar with. But I like that. Like, I think that naming things, and the way that God changes names throughout the whole Bible, like, really connects to that. Like, when people change, God changes their name. And so names are super important. And I'm not good with names, so I don't remember people's names. I write them down on my phone so that I can call them by their name next time I see them. A little trick I learned. And I have like, my notes is like full of names that I meet from people at bars and stuff like that. Bartenders and different things. So when I go somewhere, I'll go look, and I'll have a little description of them, and I'll learn everyone's name real quick before I go in, and then I can be like, oh, hey, I met a dude named Isaac yesterday, and I already forgot the girl's name, and so hopefully they aren't listening to this. But names are so important, but I'm so bad with them that I try to have crutches. What about you, Zach? What are your thoughts?
For me, I'm kind of like you guys, and not having to preach about this. What do I get to play in? What sticks out creatively, and just in fun, without having to have the purpose of here's the sermon, right? And for me, I think very quickly, the earth was without shape and form. Just the chaos of all of that, and the flexibility for it to be what it needs to be in that moment, really, really sticks out. Because I think we get stuck in this pattern of, well, here's this thing's name, and here's its shape, and here's what it is, and yet so much of who we are as people and what we see in creation itself has a lot more flexibility than that. We're not necessarily, who someone says we are, or we're not necessarily what people perceive us to be on the outside. There's so much more from within, and that earth was without shape or form sticks out really, really thick for me in this.
Yeah, I like that. The separating light from darkness too, for me, that's like really big. On our website we have on the X-ile website we have a Pantera quote from a Pantera song, that song Cowboys from Hell, where it says, "So out of the darkness and into the light." And I don't think that it seems kind of hokey maybe for people that don't know it's Pantera lyrics, but I really like that song a lot, and I think that it really is a good metaphor for like my life as I move out of darkness, where things are hidden, where things are secretive, where we're not even really honest with ourselves sometimes. And that's been a really big theme lately in my life, is trying to be real and honest with what's going on and bring light into dark places that I don't even want to think about myself. Like I have told myself this story about who I am, but that's not always accurate. And so I need to be real about who I am and where I am if I really want to grow. And that's just stuff I'm really learning about and studying right now. So that sticks out to me.
There's something so authentic about living into that humanness, right? Living into, here's what makes me me, rather than hiding behind, here's what I want you to know about me, or here's what here's how you need to perceive me, rather than, hey, here's who I am.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of light and darkness in that.
I've been thinking a lot. It's really weird that this is coming up. It's one of those deals that, like, you ever have that thing happen where like you're thinking about something and then randomly it starts to come up in other conversations. Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot the last few days about, just on my own, about like shadows and light, and the darkness and light, and the difference between all of that, and like how sometimes we like, so we'll use the phrase like, it's not always black and white, and oftentimes I feel like the dark side or the black side or whatever is the bad part of it. And I start thinking about like, how does that play out into racial issues that we have? Like Hispanic people will sometimes be like, they were chastised even within their families for being dark skinned Hispanic people, or like a light-skinned black person is seen as more beautiful. I was reading an article about when they were casting Straight Outta Compton, the types of things like that they were looking for. So they were looking for like pretty girls who were light-skinned with straight hair, and then wow. they were looking for like heavier, kind of curlier haired women with dark skin to play certain roles. And I was like, man, that's so crazy. And then like thinking about it theologically, I don't think that the darkness is bad, right? Like the darkness never is sent away. It's just there. And like in our world, we need darkness. If it was sunny and hot all the time, all of our plants would die. Like they'd stay stressed and they would never live. Like you need the darkness for life to happen. But at the same time, like you don't even know how light is until you know darkness. It's like, I love the play, like the word play that happens in the Bible around light and dark, and it like starts right away, in Genesis 1.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, dude. I love that. When I was in seminary, we talked a lot about using purple for things instead of black, and not trying to equate, right, like blackness with darkness, or blackness with bad things or evil, and I think that's a really good point, that it's all necessary. Like it's balanced, and it's right, and it works together, and it can be a really important thing in a lot of ways, even in the respect of not wanting to see things. Like sometimes we aren't ready to see things that are actually there. So even in darkness, it gives us a rest, it gives us a break, it gives us, right, like some balance in our lives. I think that's a really good, that one's not good and one's bad. It's that they work together, and they're separate, but they're both important. And yeah, the darkness doesn't go away. I think that's really good, Ross. I really like that. I really like that. All right, let's go on. Verse 6 said, and God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters, and let us separate the waters from the waters. So God made the dome and separated the waters that were under the dome from the waters that were above the dome, and it was so. And God called the dome sky, and there was evening and there was morning the second day. What do y'all think?
That was written by a scientist right there, man.
Exactly.
This
exactly.
is proof we should take the Bible literally.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. It's like this is right from the beginning. We should know that this isn't a science book, right? Like,
yeah.
The sky is not the water, right, in the sky. But this is a great explanation for people, right, that would ask the questions like, oh, why is the sky blue? Like, we still kind of ask some of those questions.
Yeah.
And
because there's water up there, obviously.
well, that's where the rain comes from. It makes sense.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I hadn't thought about it that way.
I just think that these are important things to see because, yeah, when we treat the Bible differently than how it was written, it's important to see how it was written and why it was written in the context of the things as we read the whole Bible. But this, like when we read it from the beginning, like we have to know, like this isn't supposed to be a scientific explanation for this, but it's a great story that helps you remember like important lessons, you know?
Yeah.
I learned somewhere just the understanding of that's how the dome is how people saw, you know, the world in those moments, that was the easiest way for them to explain, yeah, okay, now we have this dome. And here it is, right? But you're right. When we take things so black and white, and we're like, well, it's this because this is what it says. It's like, there's more. There's why? I don't know what I'm trying to get at now. I lost my train of thought. But just along that same idea of like, here's where we're at in the scripture, and there's this very beautiful understanding of what God makes here in these moments, and yet it's ever changing. It's constantly in motion, and this is just day 2, right, if you will, of things continuing to change and grow and be what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm reminded, all this reminds me of one of my favorite theologians, Marjorie Suhaki, said that she takes the Bible way too seriously to take it literally. And that always really stuck with me. I think other people may have said that too, but I've heard her say that. And just the way that the beauty of the Bible and artistry of the stories, and you can lose all of that when you try to make it something that it's not. You lose a lot of beauty to me. So it isn't even the seriousness of it that really I'm afraid of losing. It is that, but it's mostly the beauty of it that I'm afraid of losing. There's so much beauty in the Bible that we can lose if we just try to analyze it to death.
Part of one of the reasons I like this version of the creation story is it's just fun. Like in my head, I have fun with it, even when I'm being serious. Like if I was going to preach on this, like I wouldn't bring up Pauly Shore and Biodome. You know, like, I don't know. Maybe I would. Who knows? Like,
why not?
It depends what kind of mood I was in. But as soon as I'm reading it with guys like y'all, I'm like, yeah, Pauly Shore, man. Like, that's what I'm thinking of right now is Biodome and Pauly Shore. And like, that's what people thought they were living in or not. Like, I bet the original like readers of this knew this is some poetry. Like, this isn't to be taken literally. So what's the point in it? If it's not like, if we're not supposed to be figuring out how, maybe we're supposed to be figuring out why, you know, because it's very obvious. Like, we are not sitting underneath a dome. And I guess in some ways we are, right? Like, the atmosphere and all that, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's huge, and I think that it's almost like a song. Like there's almost a chorus, right? Like, and there was more, and God saw that it was good at the end of all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening, and there was morning, the third day. There's like a chorus, at the end of all of this, like, like a poem, like a song, like so it's very artistic, and it's about creation, and it's artistic, and that, man, like, it's beautiful in that way.
Right. Well, and I think that's the problem that we have is obviously this is trying to answer the question of why are we here? How does this work? And we get so stuck in that how, as people today, of how did we get here? How, in reality, we're just trying to answer the question of why are we here? The how is not terribly important, in my opinion. It's why are we here? What is it that we're called to be doing? And how does a story like creation inform the why are we here?
Yeah, that's good. Asking better questions is always the answer. To me, as I get older and I look for answers, really I started looking for better questions,
Mm-hmm.
and that really set me free from a lot of answers, because the questions define what the answers have to be, and so if you ask better questions, you can get better answers, I think. And I think that's really good. Let's move on. Verse 9. And God said, "Let the waters under the sky be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And then God said, "Let the earth put forth vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it." And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. Also, more science.
You ever read, I'm sure you guys did at some point, but in C.S. Lewis's Magician's Nephew, man, there's this, like, when the kids finally like see Narnia. I'm sure it's the Magician's Nephew, and I can't remember the whole scenario, but somebody is watching Aslan walk across and sing creation into being. And I'm like, I like C.S. Lewis as a writer. Like, he's fun to read with kids. He's fun. Like, there are certain things that he said that I'm like, yeah, let's hold on to that and help people focus on that. Like, you don't have to defend a lion. All you have to do is let it roar. Like, I'm never trying to defend Jesus. The fact that he believes that hell has a door that's locked on the inside, I love that idea. But the most beautiful thing I think that he wrote, in my opinion, at least in his children's books, was the idea of creation being sang into being. Like, and I think, like, this section of this creation story shows that better maybe than any of them. It just feels like, okay, now we're into a song, and this thing is being creatively created.
Yeah. And form creates function, right? I like that. I like that a lot. And there's a lot of what music and dancing and those ideas. I love those metaphors in scripture, just in general. Let's go on a little more. Verse 14. And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and years. And let them be lights in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. God sent them in the dome of the sky to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. So we have that idea of light and darkness again.
And that they're both good.
Yeah.
And God saw that it was good.
Yeah. That's good.
I think that's what keeps sticking out for me. It always does, but as we get deeper into the days, like you say, that poetic, that kind of chorus of God saw how good it was. There's something about the presence of God being there from the beginning. Just like you said, Aslan walking out across the water and watching creation, you know, God's spirit being out across all of this. For me, that never goes away, day in and day out, that presence, that spirit is still there, watching and seeing how good it is. And for me, that extends into today, you know, that the creation doesn't stop at the end of you know, Genesis chapter 2, where you know, you go off and get married and leave your father and mother. You know, it's that creation still is with us today.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
Right.
Like that's one of the things that I love thinking about with God being the creator, is that it is still happening. Like literally when you see a child being born, you're like, creation is still happening. But also, like, when you stand at the edge of the Grand Canyon, you're like, holy crap, man. Like,
yeah.
This is, I'm on a, like, there have been a few times in the last few years, and I swear it's only been the last few years where I am reminded, like, I'm on a planet. Like, it almost feels sci-fi, you know. That sounds really dumb, but so, like, living out in Texas, it's just kind of flat and everything looks the same. And Zach, I'm not trying to talk trash about your home state, but like,
please do.
It just wasn't for me. Like, the rhythms of it and the way things looked didn't fit for me. So I get back out here, and of course the Organ Mountains outside of Las Cruces are just like awe-inspiring in and of themselves. But my daughter and I went out south of Las Cruces. I can actually, like, look across my yard and see where we were at. But there's this place out there called Aiden's Crater, and it's a volcanic crater. And so we drove out there and we hiked up to the edge of the crater and then down in it. And I swear, man, I was like, I feel like I'm in a sci-fi movie right now. This does not feel like any place I have ever seen or looked at in my life. And just the way the sky looked that day, it's like, this is creation. Like, this is it. And I think sometimes when we think about creation, we're like, what that leads me to think about is, like, there's a lot more. Like, there's a whole lot more that we don't even think about as humans living on this planet, because, like, when God was creating everything. Kathy Kelsey at X-ile, I remember her saying one time, so her husband is a great theologian in his own right, and, like, was well connected with, like, theologians that we would all know and have heard of in, like, theology classes or whatever. And she said, if I'm getting the story right, she was saying that one night they were sitting around having dinner, and I don't know, I feel like it was Paul Tillich or somebody was there, like, they were all hanging out, and they started talking about creation. And he was like, you know, like, the redemption and the restoration of creation is all of creation, not just us and not just our planet, but all of it. Like, it's a universal kind of creation. And I think sometimes we make God super small by just thinking about what we can imagine and what we have seen. And so I love it when, like, I walked into Aiden's Crater and I was like, holy crap, I'm on a planet. Or you look down into the Grand Canyon, and I remember just being like, oh man, this will let you know, like, I don't know what words, I don't know what it'll let you know, but it's letting me know, like, something, it's just, like, amazing. And that's just like a dust speck size of the creation that God has put into motion, you know?
Right. Well, and I'm sure you guys experience this too. Anytime whether it's a church member or just somebody in general that you meet out in the public, and they're like, oh, you're a pastor. And you're like, oh, sorry, I haven't been to church in a while. It's like, no, it's okay. Be where you're going to be, right?
I hate that so much.
I do too. And I always tell people, whether it's a church member and they're like, oh, you know, we're going to miss church, we're going to go see our grandkids. That's where you need to be. Go be there. You're in the midst of creation there. Or, hey, pastor, I went out fishing or hiking or whatever. And it's like, good. Because guess what? You'll encounter God there too, because it's this fullness of creation that brings us together. And in the more time that you go and spend, whether it's with family and grandkids and kids and just people, or out in Glacier National Park or out in a crater or wherever it is, we encounter something, God, a spirit that's bigger than ourselves, and that pulls us back into going, oh crap, we're on a planet. And there's something bigger than me, and there's more people than me, and there's more stuff in creation. And whether it's dust or a deer or a mountain or a glacier or a lake, we get that full sense of connection to the fullness of creation to go, oh, it's not just about us. There's something bigger at play here, and I get to be a very small part of that. Which is pretty humbling when we think about it. And so my invitation is, please go be there. Please go fishing. Please go be with your grandkids. Please go do these things. And then come tell us what you saw. Tell us what you experienced.
You guys are way nicer than me. I tell them I hope they enjoy an eternity in hell, because they let me and everybody else down. I'm just kidding. But, Marjorie Suhaki, again, I'm going to talk about her because she, with what Ross was saying, what she did is I forget the name of her book, man, but it's so good. She defined sin as violence against creation. And that's what she said sin is. And man, that was really powerful to me, because it's bigger than people, right? Like, we sin against people, but when we don't take care of the planet, when we don't take care of, right, when we're not good stewards of creation all around us, like in a lot of ways, we're working against God when we're supposed to be working, right, for God. If we believe God created all this, it is so important to realize that things are so much bigger than what we notice. I didn't plan on talking about her so much I would add the book or something, but I should have, because she's all about this creation.
I think I just looked it up. I think the book you're talking about is The Fall to Violence.
Yeah.
Original Sin in Relational Theology.
Yeah, that's good, man. It's a good book. The Fall to Sin, it's called. All right, let's go on to verse 20 and keep on getting through this here. We're getting close. God said, "Let the waters bring forth swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the dome of the sky." So God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves of every kind, with which the waters swarm, and every winged bird of every kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day. Be fruitful and multiply is a thing that's said like several times, right, in the Bible. That's kind of a key phrase that keeps getting caught up in different situations, and this is the first time it appears.
Well, and it points to that continuation of creation, right? Keep going, keep creating, keep multiplying, keep doing this thing that is so good, right? Yeah, participate in creation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good, Zach. And I got nothing to add to that.
And there's that says a lot, right? To be co-creators with God, and a lot of those key phrases that we talk about. Verse 24, God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures of every kind, cattle and creeping things, and wild animals of the earth of every kind." And it was so. And God made the wild animals of the earth of every kind, and the cattle of every kind, and everything that creeps upon the ground of every kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, verse 26, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." God said, "See, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth and to every bird of the air and everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. There's a lot to that.
God got busy on the sixth day.
Yeah. Because
There's
he
a lot
knew
going
that he
on.
was taking the next day off, and God had to cram everything into the last day.
Had to cram in for vacation, right?
That's right. And we're created in that image. I don't know, any images stick out here for y'all?
Oh, so many.
Yeah.
The Imago Dei, right? The image of God, being created in God's image. That's huge. That's a huge theological concept for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, the imagery of just the climax of this story. I mean, everything is just, you have this very poetic and very seemingly processed first few days here, and then it's just everything's in motion here on this sixth day. And God is just, it's like you hit that rhythm and just creating. You know, God's just, bam, here's this, you know, here are the things that crawl, here are the livestock, here are people. And here's how I'm creating, you know. I mean, it's just, it's cool. It just seems like it's just this big swirling tornado of creation.
Yeah. And
or like an 80s montage of creation.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
I think
go ahead.
One of the things I think that's important that we miss in church, like when I say we, I'm talking about us as pastors, miss it. And I think we are missing it because we're leading churches in the way that they think theologically and biblically, or think theologically about the Bible, is like this connection to the earth, right? Like, and Dr. Willie James Jennings at Yale Divinity says that there are three demonic virtues to whiteness: possession, mastery, and control. And so, and he says it starts with the earth, like possession of the earth, mastery of the earth, and control of the earth. And then it like starts to spread out from there. But like, that's the three demonic virtues to whiteness, where like native people didn't understand possession of the land. They didn't understand control of the land. And they definitely didn't understand mastery of it. Like, they were encountering beasts that, like, because they were going to new places all the time, that they, like, their imaginations couldn't even make it up, you know. Like, I think about what if you had never seen an animal with antlers, and then the first thing you see is like this giant bull elk? Like, that would be the craziest thing you've ever seen in your life, you know. And they're not trying to possess it or master it or control it. And I think like I just want to be careful with like this idea of subduing the earth. Is that how the phrase goes?
And having dominion.
Verse 28: be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air. Like, I kind of want to like rethink what we mean when we talk about subduing and having dominion, because it can quickly turn into like subduing people, like overpowering, you know?
Yeah. I think we have to be wary of that. Len Sweet says that what we're called to do is conserve and conceive, you know, take care of what we have around us, like care for it, and then create new things, you know, at the same time. And I like that idea works better for me than words like dominion and subdue and things like that. Obviously this was right. This story was told orally for a long time, you know, before we had the same kind of issues that we have now, maybe. And so it definitely took on a different subtext for the people that were originally hearing it than it does now. But it means we have to be careful, I think, how we read that, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, go to Akanac Island in Alaska, and tell the giant brown bears there that you're there. Like there are more bears there than people. Like I've
Yeah.
come to have dominion over you and subdue you. Like it's not happening, you know, like.
Yeah.
Well, and there, you know, we for a long time, you know, people took, you know, fear God and made that theologically fear God. And for me, that's more fear in that sense. I've come to understand it as it's a respect God in these ways. And in the same way here, yeah, dominion's a really strong word. Subdue's a really strong word. And it's easy to take that and say, be in charge of it, overtake it, make it yours. And Ross, like you
Control.
said, our native folks had this respect and connection with the fullness of creation, that it was, yeah, you're gonna walk into Montana or Alaska and you're gonna come nose to nose with the grizzly bear. You don't win that fight, but you take a deep respect into the creation, into
Right.
what that bear is and what it means to you and the land around it, you know. And I think that's something we could benefit as three white dudes, right?
Yeah.
In not reimagining, but remembering the respect that we have in this fullness of creation, that it's not taking charge over other people, it's not taking charge over the land or the animals, but it's having this deep humility and respect for all of it, to go, oh yeah, here's our place. And it's not to be in charge. It's not it's not to win, which I think we get stuck in quite a bit, and can in this the back end of this Genesis of, you know, go and do these things. Your job is to be fruitful and multiply, but so is the rest of creation.
Right.
And this was written in like ancient Hebrew,
Yeah.
where it meant something a little different than what, you know,
Mm-hmm.
than what they mean, and they've been interpreted, you know. And I mean, we don't have to get into all of that, but
Right.
I think it is important. Like, even just to stick with the story, it's important to interpret the words by the story and put the story first. And if the story says this is God's creation and it's good, then we can't treat it like our creation. Like, if we remember that it's God's creation and we respect God and we respect creation, we can learn a lot from people that are that have that kind of mutual respect and the give and take relationship with creation, rather than how we think of subduing and dominion and those kind of things, like we might do, like we might be tempted to do with our own creation. But then this also shapes how we treat things that we feel like we created too. If God's involved, if we're created in God's image and then we create out of that image, if you make something, you're gonna make sure it's safe and make sure it's taken care of and make sure that it's right. And if we started treating each other like that and started treating nature more like that, I think it changes a lot of things for us and for other people.
Yeah, for sure. Like if I built a table or something for someone and then gave it to them, and then the next thing I know, like they're using it for firewood, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
You know, like
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'd be mad. I'd be hurt. Like I guess
Mhm.
it would hurt my feelings, and because I'd put like hard work into this and time, and then they just are like, yeah, whatever. Like, thanks for the gift, and then burn it. Like I think to have dominion over something could mean, instead of like overpower it, could be like take care of it, cherish it, recognize that it's a gift to you.
Yeah.
So like the more experiences we can have where it's like, man, I'm standing on the edge of this canyon, like literally awestruck. And then you read this like news article that our current president is like wanting to open up mining like right there next to the canyon again. And it's like, what? Like there are all kinds of places, man. Like can't we have respect for certain parts of creation at least, instead of like having power over and dominion over all of it? Like it's just, it feels like it's a disrespect of the gift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we have to kind of get back to, and we should be able to have these conversations about that in the midst of these stories. And I'm glad the three of us at least can have these conversations, and hopefully it sparks some other conversations with other people that are listening, and engaging this text with us, whether you're used to going to church or whether you aren't used to going to church. We appreciate you engaging with us. Check us out on social media. We have an X-ile Facebook page. We have a YouTube page. We have a website, x-ile.com. Thank you, Ross, for being here with us. I think this is a really super good conversation, and we'll do this again with you if you had fun.
Yeah, for sure, man. I would love to keep doing this.
And,
you know me, anytime I can talk a lot, I'm game.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love it. Well, thank you, everyone that's listening and watching us for joining us. And feel free to leave comments, have some just asynchronous conversation, as we used to call it in school. Post stuff. We'll have conversation. We'll get into some stuff, questions, comments, whatever you have. This is good stuff to talk about, and we're just trying to get conversations started here. So thank you all. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Zach. And we will see you all next week.
See you.